Marcus had spent most of his life moving from city to city, working under pressure, solving problems no one else could fix. After retiring from the Navy as an engineer, all he wanted was peace, a quiet slice of land with a view of calm water. When he discovered a lakeside property tucked at the edge of a small suburban town, it felt like fate. The house was modest but sturdy, and the lake stretched out behind it like a mirror to the sky. To Marcus, it was more than land, it was the beginning of a new chapter. At first, the neighbors seemed curious but polite. Some waved from their porches, while others whispered among themselves about the new man in town. But soon after he moved in, letters started showing up in his mailbox, official-looking notice from the Homeowners Association. The first was harmless enough, welcoming him and outlining community rules. Then come the demands, monthly fees, restrictions on how he could use his property, and an order to surrender authority of the dogs for community access. Marcus read the letters carefully. His brow furrowed as he looked back over the thick folder of paperwork he had collected during the purchase. The deed, yellowed with ash but legally binding, made one thing crystal clear: the lake and its dogs belonged solely to his property. Not the HOA, not the neighbors. Him. He decided to play it cool. He called the HOA president, a sharp-tongued woman named Linda who had run the board for years. SH spoke to him like he was a child who didn't understand the way things worked around here. SH said, everyone uses that lake. It is community property. You'll need to sign it over and pay your dues like the rest of us. Marcus calmly replied, Mom, I don't think you've read the right documents. The lake is part of my land. I don't answer to your board. That conversation was the spark. By the next week, whispers turned to stars, and stars turned to complaints. People who honestly smiled at him began ignoring him at the grocery store. One neighbor warned him quietly, they don't like it when someone dies and play along. But Marcus wasn't a man easily rattled. He had faced storms, machine failures at sea, and the weight of responsibility for dozens of men's lives. A suburban HOA wasn't going to scare him. One evening, as he stood at the edge of the dock watching the sunset bleed across the water, Marcus knew trouble was coming. The HOA wasn't going to let this go. But neither was he. The lake was his dream, his peace, and he had the law on his side. The letters from the HOA didn't stop, they multiplied. Every week, Marcus found a new stack in his mailbox: fines for private landscaping, citations for improper dock maintenance, even a notice claiming his fishing boat violated community aesthetic standards. Each one had a different excuse, but they all carried the same message: submit to the HOA, or life would get harder. Marcus read each one carefully, then slid them into a binder. He wasn't angry, at least not yet. Instead, he treated it like a mission. In the Navy, precision meant survival, and he applied the same discipline here. Every call he made, every visit to the county records office, every document he copied was logged and organized. The HOA thought they were wearing him down. In reality, they were building his case for him. But the harassment wasn't only on paper. One evening, Marcus walked out to the lake to find a chain stretched across the dock, a bright red padlock dangling from it. A sign read, Community Access Only. He stood there for a moment, staring at the lock, then shook his head with a low chuckle. The audacity was almost amusing. He cut the chain, tossed it aside, and replaced the sign with one of his own: private property trespassers will be prosecuted. The next morning, HOA board members marched up to his porch like an angry flock of geese. Linda, the president, stood in front, her arms crossed and eyes sharp. You're in violation of community rules, SH snapped. The dog belongs to everyone here. Remove your sign immediately or we'll take legal action. Marcus stayed calm, leaning against the railing. I don't think you understand, he said evenly. The dog, the lake, all of it, it is mine. I have the deed, the survey maps, and the county's approval to prove it. If you want to test that in court, be my guest. He fast tightened, but he didn't respond. The group huffed away, muttering about how he wouldn't last long here. Rumors began swirling in the neighborhood. Some residents avoided him, convinced by the host version of the story. But others started to wonder. Why would a man stand so firm if he didn't have the law on his side? One older neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, approached him quietly one evening and said, "I've lived here 30 years. That has been claiming control of the lake all this time. But I always thought something didn't add up. You keep fighting, son. Some of us are watching." The HOA finally tried to drag him into court, confident that Marcus was just a stubborn old man who would fold under pressure. But when the hearing began, he came prepared. He rallied out binders, original deeds, county records, and even letters from the town's founding family who had sold the land decades ago. The judge raised an eyebrow as the trial unfolded. The HOA had no legal claim to the lake whatsoever. Though the ruling was postponed, the shift was already happening. Neighbors who had once sneered at him now whispered with curiosity. The host's iron grip was loosening, and Marcus knew he had struck his first blow. The HOA wasn't used to losing. The moment Marcus walked out of that first hearing with confidence in his step, the board panicked. They couldn't afford for the threat to spread. If word got out that the lake wasn't theirs, their authority over the entire neighborhood would crumble. So, they changed tactics. It started with intimidation. A couple of strangers in reflective vests showed up at the lake one Saturday morning, walking along the docks with clipboards, pretending to be inspectors. When Marcus asked for identification, they flashed badges that looked official, but a closer glance revealed they were nothing more than laminated cards with the host logo slapped on them. Marcus pulled out his phone and filmed the entire exchange. "You're trespassing," he told them calmly. "Unless you want the sheriff here in 10 minutes, I suggest you leave." They left, muttering, but the message was clear, the HOA was trying to rattle him. But Marcus wasn't alone anymore. His old Navy buddies had been following the drama through phone calls and emails, and when he mentioned the harassment, 3 of them showed up in their trucks the following weekend. They brought fishing poles, coolers, and cameras. Together, they turned the docks into a gathering spot, lying, grilling, and documenting every single suspicious move the HOA made. Whenever one of the board members tried to march down to the water, they were met not just by Marcus, but by a team of men who carried themselves with the kind of quiet authority and years of service called jive. Meanwhile, Marcus began winning over the neighbors. Instead of locking down his lake like the HOA claimed he would, he started inviting families over for fishing trips and evening cookouts. Children who had been told to stay away from him ended up running around his backyard, their latter echoing across the water. Parents noticed how respectful Marcus was, how he asked nothing from them but respect in return. Slowly, whispers turned into conversations, and conversations turned into questions aimed at the HOA. "Why did you tell us the lake was community-owned, if it never was?" The board doubled down. They spent thousands of dollars in HOA funds hiring a legal team to bury Marcus in paperwork. They filed complaints, demanded injunctions, even tried to claim his sign violated neighborhood aesthetics. But every time, Marcus countered with calm precision. He filed machines of his own, presented clear evidence, and kept his compo while the host lawyers stumbled over half-truths. By midsummer, the cracks were undeniable. Residents began skipping HOA meetings, some even resigning their memberships. A few started sleeping by Marcus' house, offering handshakes or quiet apologies for believing the lease. The lake, once a symbol of control for the HOA, was transforming into something else: freedom, fairness, and the possibility of a community without fear. But the battle wasn't over. Linda and her loyalists weren't about to watch their empire collapse without one last stand. They whispered about new strategies and bigger plays. Marcus could feel the storm building, but he didn't flinch. He had seen storms before, he knew exactly how to weather this one. The court date arrived like the final act of a long, bitter play. For months, Marcus had endured harassment, intimidation, and endless paperwork from the HOA, but now it all come to a head. The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension as neighbors filled the benches. Some come out of curiosity, others out of loyalty, either to Marcus or to the HOA that had ruled over them for years. Linda, dressed in a stiff navy suit, sat at the host table with two lawyers at her side. As each carried herself like a queen ready to defend her crown. Marcus, by contrast, wore a simple grey suit, his posture calm and unshaken. On the table in front of him sat neatly organized binders filled with every deed, savvy, and legal record he had collected. He wasn't just prepared, he was unmovable. The host lawyers opened with bluster, painting Marcus as selfish, difficult, and unwilling to cooperate with his neighbors. They claimed the lake had always been community property, and that Marcus was trying to steal it from the families who had enjoyed it for years. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom, but Marcus remained silent, his eyes steady. When it was his turn, he rose and spoke plainly, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who had led crews through storms and chaos. He presented the original deed, highlighting the clear, indisputable line that transferred ownership of the lake and docks exclusively to his property. He showed historical maps, county records, and letters from the town's archives. Then he presented video evidence of HOA members trespassing, chaining his dogs, and sending men to intimidate him. His navy buddies had filmed everything, and the judge watched the footage with a raised brow that grew sterner by the minute. By the time Marcus finished, the room was silent. Even those who had doubted him sat stunned. The host scrambled like sand in a storm. The judge didn't hesitate. SH ruled in Marcus' favor, declaring the lake and docks his private property and scolding the HOA for years of average. Heavy fines were placed on the board for harassment and misuse of community for NDS. Linda's face drained of color as the gavel struck, sealing the host's downfall. News of the verdict spread quickly through the neighborhood. Within days, board members began resigning one by one, unable to face the humiliation. Families who had once shunned Marcus now come to his door, some with apologies, others with peace, casseroles, or simple handshakes. He didn't gloat, didn't wrap his victory in tear faces. Instead, he opened his gates. He told them, the lake is mine by law, but I'm not here to keep it from anyone. Respect my land, respect the rules, and you're welcome here. That summer, the docks were no longer a battleground but a gathering place. Children lied as they splashed in the shallows, families fished along the banks, and Marcus finally got the peace he had dreamed of, not in solitude, but in the company of people who now understood what fairness really meant. As the sun set over the calm water one evening, Marcus sat at the edge of the dock, the same place he had stood the day the HOA first tried to intimidate him. Only now, the air was filled with laughter, the smell of barbecue, and the sound of neighbors living free from fear. The war was over, the lake was his, but the peace belonged to everyone.